Good morning girls. In today's Java session we are going to cover about EJB, that is Enterprise Java Beans. This topic is very small but exam point of view this is very important, right? All the questions are very important. Let us begin. EJB is an acronym for Enterprise Java Bean, means the full form of EJB is Enterprise Java Bean. It is a specification provided by Sun Microsystem. It is helpful for developing a secure, robust and scalable distributed application. Whatever features you get in Java application, that all features you will get over here. To run EJB application, you need an application server. Okay, if you are building an application with the help of EJB, for that you need an application server like EJB container, JBoss, Glassfish, WebLogic or WebSphere. These servers can perform the following task. Number one is it can perform lifecycle management. Second, it provides security to your application, your data. Third one is transaction management, it can perform, and object pooling also done through this application server. EJB application is deployed on the server, so it is also called a server side component. Okay, whatever application you develop through Enterprise Java Bean, that we always deploy on a server. That's why it is also called server side component. Let us see when to use Enterprise Java Bean. Application needs remote access. In other words, it is distributed. We learnt in RMI what is distributed system, right? Same thing we need to access if we want to access the remote area, remote application. Application needs to be scalable. EJB application supports load balancing, clustering. Clustering means to do the grouping. Okay, application EJB application supports load balancing, clustering and failover. EJB application needs encapsulated business logic. So here EJB application can separate presentation from persistent layer. Let us differentiate RMI and EJB. Both RMI and EJB provides a service to access an object running on another JVM, or it is known as remote object from another JVM. The differences between RMI and EJB are given here. You can see on the screen. In RMI, middleware service such as security, transaction management, object pooling, that all the things you need to be done by yourself. Means these things need to be done by the Java programmer. Whereas in EJB, middleware services like as I described, security, transaction management, object pooling, that everything will be done by the EJB container automatically. Okay, no need to do any coding by the programmer. That is a plus point, we can say. RMI is not a server side component. It is not required to be deployed on the server, whereas EJB is a server side component. EJB application we must deploy on the server, right? It is required to be deployed on the server. RMI is built on the top of the socket programming, whereas EJB technology is built on the top of RMI. Now let us see the benefits of EJB. Benefits of EJB are listed here. First one is simplified development of large scale enterprise level application. If you are going to develop a big, very large size enterprise level application, in that case it will be helpful to you in a way that you can develop very simple enterprise level application. Second, Second is application server or EJB container provides most of the system level services like transaction handling, logging, load balancing, persistence mechanism, exception handling, and so on. So it will reduce the burden of programmer. We can say developer has to focus only on the business logic of the application, not on all this service level, system level services, right? Number 3 is EJB container manages life cycle of EJB instance. Thus, developer needs not to be worried about when to create or when to delete EJB objects. So, in this way, it can reduce the burden of Java programmer. There are some disadvantage of EJB. Number 1 is it require application server. If we want to deploy an application built through EJB, then we need application server. It require only Java client. For other language client, we need to go for web service. It is very complex to understand and develop EJB application. These are the advantage of EJB. Let us see what are the types available for EJB. Basically, there are 3 types of enterprise Java bean. Number 1 is session bean, second is message driven bean, and third one is entity bean. Girls, this types of enterprise Java beans are also important for final exams, theoretical exams. So note down that these all are important. Session bean, it contains a business logic that can be invoked by a local, remote or web service client. Session bean stores data of a particular user for a single session only. It can be stateful or stateless. It is less resource intensive as compared to entity beans, and session bean gets destroyed as soon as user session terminates. In the message driven bean, like session bean, it contains the business logic, but it is invoked by passing the message. Third one is entity bean. Entity beans represent persistent data storage. Persistence means to store the data on permanent basis. User data can be saved to database via entity beans and later on can be retrieved from the database in the entity bean. The task of all these types of enterprise Java bean is same, but the way of accessing the session of a particular user is different. Let us begin with the first one, session bean. Session bean can encapsulate business logic only. It can be invoked by local, remote and web service client. It can be used for calculation and for the database access also. The life cycle of session bean is maintained by the EJB container or by the application server. No need to maintain it by programmer. This is an advantage, we can say. There are 3 types of session bean available. Number 1 is stateless session bean, second is stateful session bean, and the third one is single tone session bean. Stateless session bean is basically doesn't maintain state of a client between multiple methods call, whereas stateful session bean always maintain the state of client across multiple requests. And in the single session bean, one instance per application, it is shared between the client and supports concurrent access. Concurrent means parallel. Stateless session bean is a business object that represent business logic only, right? It does not have any presentation layer in it, or it does not have a state, means it does not have any data. In other words, conversational state between multiple methods calls is not maintained by the container in case of stateless session bean, right? The stateless bean object are pulled by a EJB container. to service the request on demand. It can be accessed by one client at a time. In case of concurrent access, EJB container routes each request to different instance. Now here you can see the life cycle of stateless session bean. There is only there are only two states of stateless session bean. Number one is does not exist and second is ready. It is explained by the figure given here. First one is does not exist. In this state the bean instance simply does not exist, right? No existence of bean instance means no object available over here in this stage. Second is ready state. When WebLogic server is first started, several bean instances are created and placed in the ready pool. More instances might be created by the container as needed by the EJB container. It depends on the need of client. You can see the life cycle diagram of stateless session bean. This is important for theory exams. Now moving from the does not exist to ready state. As you can see, does not exist to ready state. The movement of object from does not exist to ready. When the EJB container creates a stateless session bean instance to be placed in the ready pool, it calls the callback method. Okay, it calls the callback method public void set session context. Here you can see set session context. It has one parameter, right? Session context CTX. After the callback method set session context is called, the EJB container calls the callback method EJB create. The EJB create method is only called once during the whole life cycle of stateless session bean. For a stateless session bean, calling the create method returns a reference to a bean instance already in the ready pool. Okay, whatever object of session bean is available in this ready pool, the reference of that object will be returned by the method EJB create. It does not create a new bean instance. Okay, keep this thing in your mind. It does not create a new bean instance. The management of stateless session bean instance is fully done by the EJB container. Now second state is ready state. When a bean instant is in the ready state, it can service client request. Whenever the request from the client from the browser comes, it provides the service, that is execute component methods. When a client invoke a business method, the EJB container assigns an available bean instance to execute the business method. Once execution has finished, the session bean instance is ready to execute another business method called by another client. Now repeat the cycle, moving from the ready to the does not exist state, right? First it comes from does not exist to ready. Now exactly opposite to that, ready to does not exist. When the EJB container decides to reduce the number of session bean instance in the ready pool, it make the bean instance ready for garbage collection, means destroy the bean instance. Just prior to doing this, it called the callback method EJB remove. As you can see in the diagram, here you can observe this method EJB remove. It does not move a bean instance from the ready to the does not exist state, as the management of stateless session bean instance is fully done by the EJB container. So this is a cycle of a stateless session bean. Now let us see how the stateful session bean works. On the screen you can see the diagram of stateful session bean, which is very similar to the previous one, first type, stateless session bean, right? Let us see what is the difference between these two. It has three states, namely does not exist, second is ready state, and third one is passive state. During the first state, the bean instance simply does not exist, means no existence of any bean. Second state is ready state. Here a bean instance in the ready state is tied to a particular client and engaged in a conversation. If any call come from the web browser, in that case a particular client and the bean will be engaged for the conversation. Third one is passive state. A bean instance in the passive state is passivated to conserve resources. The various state transition as well as the methods available during the various states are shown here. You can see the transition also. Does not exist to ready, ready to passive, passive to ready, and ready to does not exist. Let us see which methods are useful for moving from one state to second state. Begin with moving from the does not exist to the ready state. When a client invokes a create method on a stateful session bean, the EJB container creates a new instance and invokes the callback method public void set session context. Here it is. After the callback method set session context is called, the EJB container calls the callback method EJB create that matches the signature of the create method. Second state is ready state. A stateful bean instance in the ready state is tied to a particular client for the duration of their conversation. During this conversation, the instance can be execute component method invoked by the client. Third state is activation and passivation. To more optimally manage resources, the EJB container might passivate an inactive stateful session bean. This object by moving it from the ready state to the passive state. When a session bean instance is passivated, its non-transient data is serialized and returned to the disk, after which the bean instance is purged from memory. Just prior to the serialization, the callback method EJB passivate is invoked. As you can see in the diagram, here it is, EJB passivate, right? If after passivation a client application continues to do the conversation by invoking a business method, the passivated bean instance is reactivated. Okay, you can see that in the transition we have shown EJB activate method, which will activate the object of EJB and make it active and place it in ready pool. Its data stored on disk is used to restore the bean instance state right after. Moving from the ready to the does not exist state. When a client application invokes a remove method on the stateful session bean, it terminates the conversation and tells the EJB container to remove the instance. Just prior to the deleting an instance, the EJB container will call the callback method EJB remove. In this way, the whole cycle completes. Now the third type is entity EJB. Entity EJB represent persistent object. Their lifetime are not related to the duration of the interaction with client. In nearly all cases, entity EJB are synchronized with relational databases. This is how persistence is achieved. Entity EJB are always shared among client. A client cannot get an entity EJB to itself. Thus, entity EJB are nearly always used as a scheme for mapping relational database into object-oriented applications. An important feature of this type of EJB is that they have identity, that is, one can be distinguished from another, right, which is not possible in other two types, message driven and stateful and stateless session bin. This is implemented by assigning a primary key to each instance of the EJB. Did you get the point? જે પણ ઇન્સ્ટન્સ ક્રિએટ થાય છે એન્ટિટી EJBની અંદર એને પ્રાઇમરી કી અપ્લાય કરે છે. પ્રાઇમરી કી અપ્લાય કરવામાં આવે છે જેથી એનું આઈડેન્ટિફિકેશન છે એ પોસિબલ છે. Where primary key has the same meaning as it does for database management. અહીંયા primary key નો meaning જે આપણે RDBMSની અંદર યુઝ કરીએ છીએ for the identification, no repetition of rows, એ સેમ ટેકનિક આપણે અપ્લાય કરીએ છીએ, સેમ મિનિંગ અહીંયા યુઝ થાય છે. Primary keys that identify EJBs can be of any type, including programmer defined classes. Now here you can see the life cycle of an entity bean. Your figure shows the stages. Let me show you the figure. Here it is. Okay. Figure shows the stages that an entity bean passes through during its life cycle, whole life cycle. After the EJB container creates the instance, it calls the set entity context method, as they call in previous two methods, right? Previous two types. You can see here set entity context. This method of the entity bean class. The set entity context method passes the entity context to the bean. After instantiation, the entity bean moves to a pool of available instance. While in the pool stage, the instance is not associated with any particular EJB object identity. Here, okay, in this area, there is no identification for any EJB beans or EJB objects. All instances in the pool are identical. The EJB container assigns an identity to an instance when moving it to the ready stage. When the object moves from pooled to ready area, at that time the EJB assign identification to that particular object, right? Here it is. While in the pool stage, the instance is not associated with any particular EJB object identity. All instances in the pool are identical. The EJB container assign an identity to an instance when moving it to the ready stage from the pool stage. There are two paths from the pool stage to the ready stage. One is on the first path, the client invokes the create method, causing the EJB container to call EJB create and EJB post create methods. As you can see here, EJB create and EJB post create methods. On the second path, the EJB container invokes the EJB activate method. Here EJB activate method is shown, right? While an entity bean is in the ready state and its business method can be invoked. There are also two paths from ready stage to the pool stage. reverse of this one. First, a client can invoke the remove method, which causes the EJB container to call the EJB remove method. As you can see here, it is shown. Second, the EJB container can invoke the EJB passivate method. You can go with the either of methods, either of way, right? Transition from pull to ready. There are two paths available. Either you can activate EJB activate method, or you can go with the second way, where you have to call EJB create and EJB post create method. Transition from ready to pull. During this stage, programmer can use either EJB passivate method or the second way, remove and EJB remove method. This is the life cycle of entity bean. Third one is message driven bean. A message driven bean is an enterprise bean that allows Java application to process message asynchronously. This type of bean normally acts as a JMS message listener, which is similar to an event listener but receive JMS message instead of events, right? The message can be sent by any J2EE component, an application client, another enterprise bean, or any web component, or by a JMS application or a system that does not use J2EE technology. Message driven bean can process JMS messages or other kind of messages. The most visible difference between message driven bean and session bean is client do not access message driven bean through interface. Unlike a session bean, a message driven bean has only a bean class. Let us see the life cycle of message driven bean. Here figure illustrates the stages in the life cycle of message driven bean. The EJB container usually create a pool of message driven bean instance. For each instance, the EJB container instantiate the bean and perform this task. Number one is it called the set message driven context method. It is specified over here to pass the context object to the instance, and it calls the instance EJB create method to create an instance, right? That is on message. When it get a message, it calls the EJB create method to create an instance. Like a stateless session bean, a message driven bean is never passivated and it has only two states, non-exist and ready to receive messages. At the end of life cycle, the container calls the EJB remove method to destroy it. The beans instance is then ready for garbage collection. So this is very similar to stateless session bean, right? But the difference is it activates on arrival of a message. The last point is timer service. Timer service is a mechanism by which schedule application can be built. For example, salary slip at the end of at the starting of every month, right? EJB3 application, it provides a specification for time services. EJB3 specification has specified at the timeout annotation, which help in programming the EJB service in a stateless or message driven bean. EJB container calls the method which is annotated by timeout. EJB timer service is a service provided by EJB container which help to create a timer and to schedule callback when timer expires. The timer service interface provides enterprise bean components with access to the container provided timer service. The EJB timer service allows stateless session bean, single tone session bean, message driven bean and EJB 2.x entity bean to be registered for timer callback events at a specified time. after a specified elapsed time, after a specified interval, or according to the calendar based schedule. If you want to run any application after some interval, it will be helpful, right? That is possible with the help of EJB or EJB container. That's it. This is all about EJB. In the next session, we will continue with a new topic, that is Hibernate. Till then, take care. Thank you.